Hold on to your hats, the countdown to the biggest wellness event of the year is on.
Join us on August 15 and 16 in Melbourne for not 1 but 2 days of Powerhouse Wellness, featuring 11 of Australia's most inspiring, entertaining, educating, fermentating speakers.
Damo, what is fermentating?
MP, I'll tell you at the summit.
Your favourite wellness couch speakers are joined by special guest Nat Kringoudis on all things hormones and female health.
Join the Up for a Chat girls, the wellness guys, the natural nutritionist Steph Lowe, Cale Brock, Quirky Cookings, Joe Whitten, Marcus Pearce, and the rest of your favourite wellness couch podcasters.
Regular and VIP tickets are still available, but hurry before this summit is sold out. For tickets, go to www.thewellnesssummit.com. The Wellness Summit is proudly brought to you by Well and You. Be someone that makes you happy.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives. This is Up for a Chat with Cindy O'Meara, Karen Smith, and Kim Morrison.
Here we are, up for a chat about the hottest topics that are important to you, inspiring you to awaken the change within. I'm Karen Smith.
I'm Kim Morrison.
And I'm Cindy O'Meara.
And today we've got a very special chickie babe on the show with us. This little angel is actually a really, really dear and close friend to each one of us individually and also each of us together, or to us together as a group. Jodie Nolan is one of the most inspiring, powerful, brilliant, feminine, beautiful souls that I think I've crossed paths with. And I love that she's such a spunky bum, but she also has she's an educated mind. She's totally across money, totally across what makes us tick around money. And she's so, gosh, I can't even seem to find enough words for you, Joe, because to me, you're the shizballs. To me, you're it. And I'm so grateful and so excited to have you on the show and also to be able to share you with all of our listeners. So welcome.
What an intro.
Trust me, I'm going to hit you up for $50 later.
Yeah, I was just going to say. Oh, God.
Actually, Jodie, can I butt in here and just talk about how we found you?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, far away.
Okay, so many moons ago, many years ago, I was reading a magazine and I read about Jodie and her love for finance and her knowledge of finance and what she had done in her life around finance. And I was with Rachel Birmingham at the time, and who is the 4 ingredients queen. And I said to Rach, I think we need somebody like this in our seminars. And our seminars at that time were called LIP seminars. So that was ladies, what were they, Kim? Ladies?
Initiating
What were they,
prosperity.
Jodie? Initiating
Yeah.
prosperity and success. Gosh, it seems so long ago. So we contacted Jodie as a result of this magazine article and asked would she like to come on board as the finance expert in our LIPS. And then, of course, we all wrote a book together called Read My Lips. And Jodie has been very influential in my knowledge with finances. I just know what she's like in a meeting. She's I wouldn't want to cross her. Put it that way. She's straightforward. She knows her stuff. She's as passionate about finance as I believe I am about food. She helps me. I help her. We make a great team, don't we, Jodie?
We do.
And we do. We make a good team. And Jodie will say something and I will sit up and listen. I remember I just asked her a quick question and I think she flippantly told me something, but it meant so much to me. It got me thinking. I went back to my accountant. I said, what can I do? And I bought a farm, didn't I, Jodie?
Yeah, you did. I need to be careful about what I say.
So I just want people to know that, you know, Jodie is a friend, but she's one of those friends that when you need to know things about finance, she's the girl you call on. Seriously, Jodie, I just want everybody to know that what they're about to hear, they should listen to, because you've always been ahead of the game. You research like there's nobody else out there that researches. So me in particular, I want to really listen to what you've got to say, because we all have businesses. Karen, Kim and I, we both, and yourself, we all have businesses. And I think it's important to know what's coming so you can prepare. And if we think that there is some downtime coming, we need to put stuff away for that. And I think you articulately, you're so articulate in how you say this. So I take note of you all the time. I love reading your stuff, and I just want to just blow your trumpet just that little bit more.
Oh, thank you.
And
very sweet.
Yeah, I want to add to it now too. And she's super hot. Oh my gosh. She's so
Right.
hot. Oh my god! So
It's like the Jodie Nolan fan club over here.
Yeah, I know. And I'm so putting this out there into the world. You know that, don't you?
No, but she is such a beautiful. I had the privilege of marrying Jodie a couple of years ago, and we were all there, and it was just, she's such a bright girl, and I'm with you, Cindy and Karen, that to have youth, major experience of highs and lows, children, and all your qualifications behind you. I think what I'd really love to share, part of what I wanted to share with you today, was your ideas and understanding around the energy of money, not just, so many of us look at it as a budgeting thing, and you're going to hate the word. I don't like the word budget. But, anything around, the flow of what it means to have money. And I would love us to obviously give some really good pointers on how to have a good relationship with money, regardless of what we've been through, but also have a really good understanding around how you feel your energy towards and around money also does affect the way that we earn and spend money. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Just to touch on that, Kimmy, that's a whole topic in itself. I mean, you girls know energy far more than I ever do. I'm naive, actually, to it, except to say that when it comes to money, it has a life force of its own. And you only need to be without financial awareness or without money or without currency to realise how powerfully it affects every other aspect of your world. So, and then when you've got it too, the changes that you can make and the inspiration that you can bring and the things that you can do when you've got money behind you, again, is phenomenal. So I think it's the kind of commodity that deserves huge respect. When you abuse money in your environment, whether that's not looking after it, not caring how you make it, not caring how you spend it, not caring where it goes, that sort of reflects in other areas of your world as well. But that's a whole another topic that we can talk about, but I can definitely touch on that. So there's no real mystique to it, I suppose. It's been my experience that when I have areas of my world in order, so for instance, I know the money that's coming in, I know the money that's going out, I can tell you categorically, what I might have in these investments in this super and roughly what my assets are worth. If I roughly know all of this in my world, I can actually give money a wide berth. I can just leave it to do its own thing, and I don't stress about it. I don't bring negativity to it. I don't adversely make me feel sick in the guts. I just think it's a whole life force of its own. And then weirdly, that frees up energies to bring more of it to me. The minute I start clamping down, stressing, worrying, robbing Peter to pay Paul, worried about where the next thing's going, worried about this particular investment, as soon as I bring all that negative energy into it, for some reason things start going pear-shaped. So probably one of the biggest things that you can ever do is not just to stick your head in the sand and go, okay, well, if I don't know about it, then surely that's not bringing negative energy to it. You actually need to be aware of what's happening, but just let it be itself and not bring all the negative to it. So what I generally encourage my clients to do, whether it's small business or if I'm coaching one-on-one, is to be able to say, let's get a thorough snapshot of where you are right now, today. And then once we've got that, we just need to look at it monthly. And it's not a big deal. We don't make a big issue out of it. We just need to roughly know where you are. And then we can say, look, you're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. And then we can identify the areas, that need attention. But otherwise, that whole energy. And once people roughly know where they are, usually they're in a better position than they think they are. And that in itself creates more positivity. And look, I love it. I could talk about it till the cows come home.
So, girls, I think if we could get started, first of all, I'd love to ask you, Jodie, what got you interested in money from a young, like, what were you good at school with economics and accounting, or where did it all start for you?
That's a good question. No, I was hopeless at school. I hated maths. I did advanced maths and I hated it. I went to work. I finished year 12, did quite well, went straight to work for a law firm because my mum was a lawyer and thought that's what I should do. And 12 months into studying law and working in a law firm, I realised that I just didn't like it. It wasn't a passion. And weirdly, down the road at this other big institution, I saw people coming in and out in fancy cars and fancy suits, and they just seemed to have it all going on. And then I finally got to meet a couple of these people, and they worked in financial planning, in finance sector. And a couple of lunches with them, I realised that I'm thoroughly fascinated about what it is that they do. You know, when they talk about trading markets, or, you know, they talk about what's happening with the Dow or any of that sort of stuff, it just sort of sparked a massive interest. So I think I was about 19 at the time. I'd been saving. I was looking at buying my first home at the time. And, so I ended up getting offered a job with them. And so I went to work with them, and I studied uni at night and worked for them full-time during the day, and that's pretty much how it started. So then I worked for financial planning firms for lots of years, independents, and went to the big banks. In my career as a financial planner, that's where I tended to learn about, you know, the commodities, and then I got into a bit of the knowledge on trading and derivatives, and it just expanded my knowledge from there. So that's how I started. I just saw what someone else was doing and thought, gosh, that really resonates with me.
So did you buy your first home at that age?
I was just a little bit older. I was 19 and a half when I got my first place.
Okay, so just that is just in itself a major look, I mean, I don't know, at 19 I was on my first one day overseas trip and looking at spending money, not saving it. So I just
me too.
Where was that mindset to do that?
Well, I think a lot of it was the people I surrounded myself with. You know, looking back now, they say that you're the sum of the 5 most people you hang around most. And I really believe that to be the case. I had some really great mentors at the time, people who are a lot older who basically instilled some really ground level things, you know, in so much as like, for instance, the first property I didn't live in. I still rented with my friends, but I bought a place that I wouldn't live in but someone else would, and then it was an investment property. And so you know, even just that learning lesson, you know, I couldn't afford to live where I wanted to live, so I bought something that was, you know, somewhere out in the sticks and someone else rented it. And, you know, and then I got capital growth in that, and then I used that equity to buy another property, and then I used that equity to get into the share market. And then I margined up from the share. So it was just, it was a natural progression. And it's something that anybody can do. You just need someone to sit down and show you the figures and do the due diligence around it.
Therein lies the $1 million point. You need someone to show you how. I reckon unless you've been brought up in this environment, or unless you're actually surrounded by people that talk this language. I mean, the minute you say equity, I thought at first you were talking about, I don't know, equal rights. I don't know, equal what? But it's seriously, as we become more educated in this topic, it obviously seems a lot easier. So just walk through for any of our young listeners, what should they be looking out for then at such a young age so that they could get their first property? So you said that you couldn't afford to live in it. So are you suggesting your first home should be an investment property?
Yes, or the other thing you could do, it depends on where you live, depends on the demographics. You know, at the moment, Sydney and Melbourne, in my opinion, are hyperinflated. You know, there's a lot of talk about Brisbane and the surrounding New Southeast Queensland being quite lucrative in that respect and still having areas of growth. But then there's a lot of remote areas, you know, where people are happy to rent. So it just depends on where you live. But if you're in an environment where a unit or a small home is potentially within your budget, so you can raise 20% of what it might be worth, then there's two things you can do. You can either look for your parents to go guarantor for you, which I don't suggest, but it is an option. I like the idea of you being able to stand on your own 2 feet, or you save up those funds to get your deposit for that property or that unit. If I was a young person again, I would save like crazy, stay at home, save like crazy, then get that first unit, something the smallest, the most affordable, the cheapest place, not a nice big 4-bedroom, with 3 bathrooms. I'm talking about really ground entry level, and then rent a room out to your friends so that they can help pay off your mortgage. And then when you're in that home becomes your principal place. So for the first 12 months, you need to live in that before you can possibly rent it out. The beautiful thing about that is that a principal place is then tax-free when you go to sell it. So from there, then you can start to look at, okay, well, I'm building equity in this. I'm actually in the property market. This is incredible. It's a tax-free asset which appreciates. All those sorts of things go to creating wealth for a young person going forward.
Wow. Seems so simple. Why aren't we taught this at school?
Yeah, good question. Look, seriously, if I ended up on a board where I discussed year 11 and 12 curriculum and put together programs for our next generation, I would be the happiest little kid on the planet, because I think at the end of the day, the worst thing about our schooling system is they do not teach us about health, they do not teach us about wealth, and they do not teach us about relationships. And yet when you get out of school, they're the only 3 things that cause you grief. People stress about their health, they stress about their wealth, and they stress about their relationships. And yet nobody broaches this in year 11 and 12.
I agree entirely. I agree entirely. I think our education system is teaching the wrong things. And I remember doing Australian history, and while I think Australian history is important, they lied. They actually lied to me. And I often wonder, like you think about health, they're actually not telling them truths either. So what are they going to teach them in finance? That's the thing, is that it's frustrating, because I see what they're teaching in health in high school and in primary school, and it's based on the Australian guidelines, but oh my gosh, they're so bad. So what are they going to teach in finance, Jodie, if they're teaching like they teach in health? They're so backward in their thinking. You say things often that I go, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
And maybe it's about parents encouraging this, but most parents aren't brought up like this. Most parents don't think to invest. Most parents sometimes don't even have a home of their own.
Well, we're taught to grow up and do that great Australian dream, buy a house, spend 50 years paying it off, and then when you get somewhere near retirement, start pooling funds and you'll live off that. But the truth is that just hasn't worked, will never work, and exponentially when you map it out, you can see really clearly, people do data sets on this all the time, and that it's just not viable. And going forward, if you're going to teach your kids that same thing, I'm a firm believer in assets in all the different quadrants, like your property portfolios, your share portfolios, and having cash and having investment holdings, or businesses, that sort of thing. It's the same. I don't know what they would teach, Cindy, to be honest, at school. It scares me. But these days, the huge issues with debt globally, our young ones get straight out of school and the first thing they do is get a car or a car loan. And then they get into the GE finance debts and the credit card debt, and then they've got, Foxtel, and they've got all these outgoings, and there's no delayed gratification. Everything's instant. I want it now. I'm getting it now. And then there's very little support for when the big repercussions hit. So, the amount of kids going bankrupt in their early 20s, now I sound old, but it's phenomenal, because it's easier just to walk away and have 5 or 6 years of bad credit and leave their $40,000 or $50,000 worth of debt behind than it is to work out how to pay it off. And it's just, look, it's a mindset thing. It's an education thing. It needs to start super early. I've got a 5 and 6 year old, and sadly, I think I'm probably going to the other extreme, because my two won't do anything unless they get paid for it. So I say, can you please clean up the playroom? Okay, well, that'll cost you 50 cents. I'm like, no, you need to do it because you're part of the family. So
actually, you know what's really interesting is, I have the 20-year-olds. I don't have the 5-year-olds anymore, and I think they cost me more now than they ever did in my life, or their lives. And I just, I actually look at the education, like Casey will have done 8 years of university by the time she finishes. 2.5 years of that will be private university. The rest was undergraduate and prerequisites and whatever else she had to do. And she's going to come out with a hefty bloody debt. And Tania's looking at an education place that's $95,000 for an undergraduate.
Wow.
And I think that these kids, that want to go to university, first of all, they come out with this humongous debt. And then they get, I know when I was in school, I wanted stuff. I was sick of living on the breadline. And so we got out and, yes, we rented, but we also went into overdraft. And I think we stayed there for quite some time until we went, right, we have to educate ourselves because we need to know what we need, what we have to do in order to get ahead. So it's frustrating, isn't it? And I look at my kids and I think, well, if they didn't have us, they'd be on the breadline.
Yeah,
they really would be on the breadline.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I don't necessarily think the HECS debt is a bad thing. I think education in our country is phenomenally expensive for what it is. But I paid for my masters as I went, which was 60 or 70,000 or something, which was ridiculous. But it was something that I wanted to do. And now my husband's just finished his master's in mining engineering, which has cost us the same. And you think about the amount of stuff, but going forward, to be educated in that respect, I think sets you apart as well. So if a child's showing the tenacity and the nous to go and study and do uni, hats off to them. And then over time, that HECS debt will pay down with what they're earning. So I think at the end of the day, it does become, because if they can do the HECS debt environment, that is tax-free. So it is a good way to do it, and they will get better jobs, and it is highly competitive in the world these days. You can't afford, people advocate, you can be entrepreneurial and not have an education behind you. But in my experience, it's incredibly difficult to be entrepreneurial and to have to solely rely on trusting others with experience. If you've been to uni and you've done that, you'll generally have the skill set, not necessarily to understand, to be able to parrot back textbook stuff, but to be able to research for yourself, to be able to deduce what is the correct way to go, just based on the fact that you've had to problem solve for a few years. So I think, if anything, the uni just gives kids a great tools in skill sets in problem solving and researching and trying to find solutions, which they're going to need in life.
I think that's a really good point, because I think that, like you said, it's at least 2 or 3 years or 3 or 4 years or 6 or 7 years, whatever it is, of full-on problem solving and really being put in a position where they've got to, they've got to justify where they found things and how they found things. And I think that that can only be a huge benefit. I'm interested, Jodes, to really understand, though, I'm an accountant. Okay, so let's just...
We won't hold that against you.
I was going to say, let's put it out there and let us not hold that against me. So, I didn't grow up thinking when I was 6 years old, I want to be an accountant. I so did not do that. Like you, I sort of fell into it, but I got out of it. But you just seem to have expanded yourself inside of this environment and have become this wealth of information, this wealth of knowledge. And what I do love the most about you is you're also a wealth of experience. Because I'm a real, and this is just me personally, but there are a lot of people who have a lot of beliefs and a lot of book smarts, but unless they've got experience, they can't know it. And you know from the bottom of your bottom and the seat of your soul what works, what doesn't work, what's right, what's not right. And I'm interested to understand what's kept you in it, because the next question around what you foresee from a financial point of view and a global point of view, I think that that's going to speak volumes to it, because only somebody who has so much passion and so much connection to something like this can have foresight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you just seem to have such incredible foresight. So what's kept you in it?
Okay. Oh, no one's ever asked me that before. That's a good,
Welcome
that's a good
to
question.
welcome to Up for a Chat. And
Yeah, that's right. The hard-hitting question.
oh yeah.
Well, for those that don't know my background, I lost millions in 2008 in the fallout of the GFC. For lots of different reasons. I was self-made multimillionaire, living in a marble and glass mansion, just had my first child. Life was really peachy keen and rosy. Thought I'd had retired at 32 or whatever to have my family. And unbeknownst to me, there's massive fallout across the globe with what's now known as the global financial crisis of 2008. So everyone will be very familiar with that, and we're only 6 or 7 years past that, and we're only just starting to get our headway. For me, yes, that was traumatic. Yes, it was horrific. Yes, but the learnings that I'm taking from that now, there's probably two really crucial things that come to mind as soon as I start talking about this. One is I am so glad that I had assets in every quadrant, because if I didn't, I would have nothing to start with again. So that particular global demise was way beyond my control. No one saw it coming. And if they did, they're liars. No one saw it coming. To protect yourself against unforeseen events, things that the world is going to throw at you, and you'll have people listening to this that have been struck down with things that are way more significant than the loss of $1. That they're up against the fight of their life in cancer. They've lost somebody that they've adored through an accident. They've got bigger losses. And you'll have other people listening who've been made bankrupt, or who are going through a divorce and they're about to lose half of everything. So it doesn't matter what the loss is, but what are the learnings that we can take from it then? So for me, one of the biggest thing is in order to try and mitigate my risk going forward, so to try and lessen the impact of this potentially ever happening again, I am so glad that I had assets in shares, property, and cash. You'll meet people who go, no, I'm not into shares. They're too scary. They freak me out. And generally, I think that in the back of my mind, that's just a lack of education, to be honest, because there's massive amounts of benefits in shares, both Australian and international. If you just own property, that in itself is a massive risk for lots of other reasons. You're not exposed to fully franked dividends that come with the Australian shares, et cetera, et cetera. But because I had assets in all of it, that when we lost the share market investments, and everything went into margin call and everything was liquidated, and then we had to sell down businesses to try and pay down outstanding debts, et cetera, et cetera. The only thing that we had left when we finally liquidated all was a little bit of equity left in property portfolio. So that's probably one of the things that I tend to suggest to people now is, as you're building wealth over your lifetime, try and learn about different asset classes so that you can not only glean all the positives, but if something was to go pear-shaped, at some point, you've got the means or the wherewithal to get yourself out to start again. So that's the first learning. The second is, holy crap, if that could happen in 2008, and it was a 50% market fall, and historically the market, the lowest it had ever fallen was 1929 stock market crash, which was something like 30%. So for most of the planners, the investment analysts that I know, we safeguarded our portfolios for a collapse of 40%. No one thought that half the world's markets could be annihilated within a few weeks. So if someone says to me now, I've mitigated my risk, or I've lessened my risk, or I'm all over this, I'll want to know what their LVRs are, which is a loan to value ratio, how much they owe versus how much they own, to see where they're at, because there's a very good chance that the markets could fall 50% again. If it's happened once before, it could happen again, except that it could happen bigger than the last one. And that sounds like a lot of scaremongering, or it might not be a significant fall of 50% like we saw with the GFC, but it might be a fall of 30%, but then we go into a world depression. So
I think I'm in a world of depression listening to it.
Oh, it's frightening,
Jodie,
isn't it?
It is, and I just have a question for you. With how does the world affect Australia? Seriously, like I feel like we're down here, we're doing our own thing. I don't get how they all talk about Greece. Can you explain how the world affects us?
Okay, so we're only about 5% of the world global environment anyway. So really, it's we don't really rate a mention. The problem is in today's age of technology. So we didn't have these issues 20 years ago when I started studying finance. These issues now, my phone, for instance, is set to alerts, so I can see exactly what's happening in the yen, or exactly what's happening with the US dollar, or if the oil price hits this particular thing, I'm all over it. And then I'll research very, very quickly in 2 seconds on my phone about 5 different sites, which will tell me why have oil stocks plummeted in the last 15 minutes. So with that technology, it means that our markets react. Gone are the days when they'd say, prices are built into, how do I explain it? So, for instance, let's say us four run massive, big global companies, like we own Coles Myer and we own BHP and we own these big companies in Australia. The 4 of us sit down to have coffee and we come up with this fantastic idea about how we're all going to work together. So then someone at an adjoining table overhears that, and they go into their broker and says, you know what, these 4 companies are going to go gangbusters because I heard them having a discussion about blah, 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 blah. So that there is called insider trading. And if you were to go and buy shares in all of our companies based on a conversation that you heard, you'd go to jail for it. That used to be a massive thing in the 80s, in the dot-com era, when people were because they didn't have the technology that they have now. These days with technology the way it is, we don't have any of that anymore. Everything's instantaneous. You're finding out about, people sit in meetings and then tweet what happened in that meeting. So it moves at a faster pace, and that's how come Australia gets absorbed into all of this. The other issue that we've got is that the massive levels of debt in the world. And I could talk for the next 10 minutes on it, but basically, in a nutshell, there's hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of debt in the US, and they're the world's biggest powerhouse. The next one is China. And can I just tell you that China has had their stock market bottoms fallen out of it about 30% in the last couple of months. But they've been artificially stimulating their Chinese markets for the last 6 to 12 months. The government have been giving people money to invest into the stock market. They have opened up margin loaned facilities so that average people can invest their money into the stock market, amongst other things. So they're artificially stimulating their market with borrowed money that they've borrowed from the US by way of government bonds. Now, there's a whole gamut of things that you don't really need to know about that, except that if they get into trouble and they start selling down their government bonds to the US, the government bond market in the US is already in a bubble, and you only need to research government bond market bubble and you'll go, oh, okay, well, I don't understand much of this except it looks pretty mean. If that starts to go, there'll be a ripple effect, and that's where the world then panics based on technology. You only need one financial institution like a Lehman Brothers or something to go under, like what happened with 2008, and then the ripple effect is astronomical. So you'd hope common sense prevails, but it sometimes doesn't.
Are you predicting something here, Jodie? Is there a prediction in
No,
this?
I'm not predicting anything. I do a legal disclaimer. But what I would say is that, we're not I don't want to be doomsday and doom and gloom, except to say that there are indicators right now in the world that make it look like we could potentially be exposed to another adverse incident. That's what I will say. And then if that's the case, it'll just be a matter of writing it out again.
Jodie, how come you know this and the people who are at the heart of it all are not knowing it?
They do know it. They do know it.
Okay, well,
they do it.
Explain to me why they're doing it.
They can't tell you about it because then people will panic.
But you know about it. So there would be heaps of other people that know about it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now we're all panicking.
Yeah, don't do that. That's not helpful. No, it's not. It's not a panic situation because it could be 3 to 6 months away. It might be a big fall that we get, which might be 10 or 12%, and then that just puts us into where the government will just try and lower interest rates. The thing that worries me and worries a lot of economists and analysts is that in the last GFC, we came off the commodity boom. We don't have that to back us up as a country this time round. We had interest rates at 5 or 6% last time. We don't have that this time. They've already dropped them so low to try and stimulate consumer confidence and spending. We don't have that luxury this time. And the level of debt globally, I mean, there's always going to be – the issues with Greece is just debt-related, nothing else. They're paying their pensioners an exorbitant amount of money and they're robbing Peter to pay Paul and they're just borrowing more and more. They're printing their own money. Their inflation, they'll either have massive issues with inflation going forwards or they'll have massive issues with having to move out of the euro and back to their own currency, which they can't even afford to print. So every different area has got their own issues. Every country wants to try and keep things smooth. You can't panic the general population because they'll freeze. They won't buy. They won't spend. They won't do anything like that. So all I'd say to your podcast viewers, listeners, if you're listening, is just keep it in the back of your mind. Listen to what's happening. Perhaps start to think, I might not look at getting big industrial estates and leveraging myself to the eyeballs in the next 6 months. I might start to pay down some credit card debt. I might start to put us in a stronger position. I might start to become more aware. The good thing, can I just say, while I'm on a running tangent,
go,
is when this stuff does happen, if it does happen, then it represents a beautiful, magnificent time to buy in the markets, whether it's property or shares. Because it's only the share price that plummets, which is really just a paper loss. The value of the company doesn't change generally. So, you can still buy your banks because they're still kind of worth the same. You're just getting them at a discounted price because the markets are panicked and they're irrational.
So you would say, in any case, whether we're going to prepare for something that may have happened like 2008 or even preparing for our future, you would be saying make sure you're in all sorts of things, cash up a little bit, get out of debt. Is this what you're saying, Jodie, is what we should do?
Yeah, as a whole. So if I had to talk holistically about what someone would do in their lifetime of money, I would love to suggest that they consider getting shares, property and cash in all aspects, and it doesn't take a lot to learn from people like myself, especially those of us that spruik our knowledge, just willy-nilly to anyone that will listen. But cash holdings are really good. Cash is great for not necessarily putting, lots of money aside because you can't get anything in bank interest these days. But just to have that little bit of buffer there, a lot of people are just living on credit cards to try and pay down private debt, your credit cards, your mortgages, anything that's not tax deductible. Definitely contributing to super over time, although the thing that worries me about super, while I'm on my tangents, is that, the government are very, very keen to get us into super and put all of our wealth into it. But at some point I can see them making us commute it to a pension rather than being able to take it as a lump sum.
They've been talking about that.
Yeah. And at some point, at this point, superannuation is just an environment and it's still your money that's in there. It's just taxed differently. But I can see them saying after 20 years of us, accumulating assets, they'll say, right, okay, so we're going to change the legislation. Now, whatever money's in there stays in there and you can only draw an income from it. You can't actually take it out to pay off your mortgage, or you can't take out $100,000 and sail around the world. They'll put limits on what you can and can't do with your own money.
Yeah.
What about self-managed super funds? They can't do that to self-managed, can they? Or they will?
It'll just be the super environment, full stop.
Jeez.
You know, it's interesting. We went and saw our accountant a couple of weeks ago, and the accountant, well, actually not a couple of weeks ago because I've just recently switched, but it was a couple of months ago, and the accountant was saying, put your money into super, put it into super, put it into super, put it into super. And Matt and I looked at each other and went, I don't think so. I don't feel like that feels safe. And then we looked into the self-managed super fund, and no joke, the next day there was a huge big show on the TV. I don't know if it was on SBS or ABC, but it was a show specifically around superannuation and the intended changes to legislation that then increases the tax threshold for superannuation and then also transitions it into a pension payment only. So you can't do what you want with your money. And both Matt and I looked at each other and went, thank God we didn't take that advice, because it would have put us on struggle street to do that.
Yeah. Well, see, the interesting thing is that you get the benefit now. So superannuation has huge benefits now as far as creating, that tax
haven.
Or the tax benefits. Plus, if you're retired, a lot of people have got allocated pensions and annuities, or they're self-funded, and they, it's beneficial in relation to tax for those people.
Yeah.
It definitely does have lots and lots of merits. And look, I've got super, so I'm in that environment, and but I just think that going forward, it's just something to think about. I like the idea of always retaining control. But you think if you're the government, this is where the wealth's being built.
Absolutely.
They've got
with
generations.
An aging population.
Totally. There's going to be hundreds of trillions of dollars in pocket pools of super. So, and guess where super's invested generally?
Oh, yeah.
The share market.
In the share market, yeah.
So what happens when we've done like we've done the last 6 years, where people's supers are eroded because they're in shares?
Oh, my dad has had so many of his friends who are 70 and 80 who've lost all of their money when the stock market crashed, and they've had to go back and try and find jobs.
Yes, we'll go on the pension and live on $20,000 a year as a couple.
There's got to be another way.
On.
There's got to be another way.
So, and then that's where the smartest minds in the world get together and try and come up. This is as a economist or as an ex-planner, I'm taught about the different asset classes. There's shares, property, cash, but within those you've got literally hundreds of investment opportunities, thousands of investment opportunities. And then when you get into, which I love looking at, is like the analyst side of things. How do we hedge our bets or get into the hedge funds to work off currency? This is what the banks do overnight. They'll trade currencies overnight while we're asleep in order to glean that little bit of extra profit.
Yeah.
It's a whole minefield. I love it. but then this is no different to me getting your messages, Kaz, where, you're talking about quantum physics and energies, and I'm like, oh my God, I can feel it. I have no idea how to interpret it, and I can't tell you how it works. And then I look at something like Cindy's stuff, and she's talking about trans fats and something else and what we can and can't eat. And then I get to that point where, can you just write a book on what I can eat, and then I'll just stick to that, because it gets so confusing.
Yeah.
And Kimmy's the same. I rang her office last week and said that I was really sick, and her staff are saying, oh gosh, well, where's your immune boost? Why don't you have that out? That's antibacterial. I'm like, oh yeah. So we all have our little things that we're really, really good at, and I guess that's the whole idea of Up for a Chat, is that you try and subtract this information from people and apply it to your own worlds.
So for somebody... Oh, sorry, Kim.
No,
we're so excited.
Oh, we've got so
all
many
ask
questions.
I was just going to say, so for someone like me who is sitting here thinking, I just keep thinking I hear super something or rather along with artificial insemination, which I think wasn't insemination, but something else.
Doesn't take long. Doesn't take long.
I was waiting for it to go there.
Yeah, it doesn't take long.
Well, I'd like to know if I could make money doing that. That'd be probably a lot better off. But I'd love to know. So for someone, especially for me, Jodie, as a parent, I'm not what I would call highly educated in money. All I know is that you should save more than you spend, and I think that's a fairly good philosophy just to start with. But the reality is when you've got kids, and you just mentioned it before with your two little Lees saying it's worth 50 cents, it's and I love that whole thing. What's your advice to us mummies on, if we're not literate like you, but what's the basics? What do I basically need to understand in order then to be the best teacher for my children and have the best opportunities for me and my family?
Yeah, that's a good question. I like the idea of just them understanding that you don't put a card in the wall and get money out. You know, there's so many kids, they just see you swipe over a card. To be honest, they don't even know what cash is. You know, they're not even aware of 5 cents, 10 cents. So what I do with my two particularly is we've got a jobs chart. They get paid this small allowance for the jobs that they do, and then I'm tough on them. If they don't do their jobs, they don't get paid. And I don't hear the end of it, to be honest, some days. But then other days when they really want something, you know, they'll go out of their way to say, look, Mum, I've, you know, watered all the plants or something. So but to add up, to be able to see that, you know, 2 5 cents add up to 10 cents, and that 1 10 cents is worth the same amount. It's surprising in primary school the amount of kids that don't realise that 2 50 cents add up to $1, and it's the same as that gold coin. And then to understand the value of earning $1, I think. I don't know. That's probably the biggest thing, because the next generation they're gonna have that delayed gratification, or the lack of delayed gratification. They want everything today. So one of the things that I'm doing with my two is that part of their salary, yeah, their big $3 a week, part of their income, some of it they're allowed to save. So generally, as a rule, we try and do that whole, they can spend 50% of it because they're little kids and that's half the fun. They've got to save 30 or 40%, and then 10% has to go to a charity. So one of the things that we do is there's this, you know, that puppy dog coin things for the guide dogs, is it?
Yeah, the guide dogs.
Yeah, so my two love that puppy dog at the shopping centre. And so they give their charitable portion to the guide dogs, to the puppies, probably because it's just this life-size puppy the same size as them. But they like the idea of it going to charity. The other thing that we do is before Christmases and things like that where they're going to get more toys, we go into the toy room and clean out all the toys that no longer serves them or makes them feel happy and joyful, or that they play with, and that goes to charity. And there's quite often a lot of tears around that, but then they get excited about some other kids being able to play with it, and they're not allowed to do that. They're not allowed to get new presents until old presents go to charity. So then that creates a whole way of going, okay, well, in order for me to get something more, I free up this and I'm giving, and, you know, it's just trying to instill some more the values behind money necessarily.
I love it.
I think you have nothing to worry about with your two. They're absolutely adorable. But
well, I think what happened, which was interesting, because I too think that they sometimes think that the money comes out of the tree. I mean, I still think it comes out of the thing, and my husband's away once a year, and I love the fact that there's still money. Whenever Danny's around, he always puts money in my wallet, and he fills my car. And
I'd love to be a kept woman.
I love it. But
in my next life,
my next life too.
But the thing I love about it, there's a payoff for that. Obviously, you know, he's away 8 months of the year. But one thing I noticed just with us, you know, the way we are and the way we talk about and being around you girls. And then I think what's really taught me about money is building a business as well. Or I'm not saying I know a lot, but having to understand and having people responsible. But what was so amazing is Jacob got offered this job, and I may have mentioned this on it, to help someone for a day. Anyway, I said to him, look, go and watch and learn and see what you can do and see how much you can actually, you know, learn by watching the boss and the other people that are working there. And he was working at an auction. Anyway, at the end of it, the boss turned around to him and said, oh, Jacob, just a minute, I'll get you some money. And to my son's credit, he turned around and he said, oh, look, please don't pay me. I've really looked at this as some work experience and I'd like to give my time for that. The guy was so flippin' impressed that he turned around and gave him a $100 note and said, listen, mate, you're the kind of kid that I want. You know, let me know when you're finishing school, because you're the sort of kid that would do really well for me. And I thought, it's really, and that sort of sparked his interest. Do you know what he's just chosen for subjects for next year? He's decided that he needs to do some business skills, and he's just thinking, well, maybe if I do a little bit of, I think it's economics he's studying. He's looking at chemistry, and it just that one bit of feedback from that one businessman who then said, he's a great kid, made him go, well, maybe I don't know what I want to do, but maybe money is kind of how the world ticks. And I just wanted to know your thoughts around that for teenagers. What sort of subjects should they be looking at? In order to have, we know that you're all saying that the schools aren't providing enough, but surely there's something there for them.
Yeah, that's the thing is that they're taught quite often, that they'll get out of school and they'll get themselves a job, and if you're really lucky, you can follow your passion. But if not, then you just go into a normal job somewhere. There's very few people teaching entrepreneurials because not everyone can be an entrepreneur. Not everyone can be a business owner. There's a lot of people that just aren't wired that way. They don't have the drive or the ambition or the motivation and yourselves, it's actually incredibly difficult. It's very, very hard to be a business owner. But if you've got a child who's exhibiting skills of leadership, or a child that's exhibiting entrepreneurial skills in the things like in what Jacob's just done, where he's gone, listen, I'm just happy. The thing that resonates with what Jacob did was not about money, not about anything else, is his respect for the process, his respect. And when I was talking before, I meant the feelings and the emotions and the energy around money. In that instant, he recognised the learnings. And that is very entrepreneurial. That is very leadership orientated. That's not just someone who's like, what's in it for me? What can I get out of it? So if you recognise those sorts of things in your children, that's where I'd be encouraging, the business subjects. So definitely anything to do with IT for a start, anything to do with economics. Economics can be boring in school, though, for kids. But, anything to do with that. There's a lot of programs around, and I'm sure you girls would agree, that if you have a child who's 15, 16, 17, and they're showing an interest in what it is that you do, I'd have them following me around for a week happily. And then they're the ones that I'm going to give an internship to. They're the ones I'm going to want to help through uni. They're the ones I'm going to write awesome references for. I can give you a classic example. There's a young one, now I sound really old. She's just turned 18. She's done a bit of babysitting for my children, and she wants to be a police officer. And so at 18, she's at TAFE. She's doing all her legal courses. Very, very smart kid, very bright, really socially aware and socially conscious. She asked me for a reference so she could get a little part-time job, and I dropped everything to get her this reference so that she could get the job ASAP. And she was gobsmacked with the kind of reference that I would write. But in the time that I've known her, I've got to see not only her intellect, but also the way she problem solves, but also her kindness, her values, and that sort of head start with teenagers, that'll set them apart from everyone else. So
beautiful.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot in that, and I think that you mentioned it earlier on, Kimmy, about how we actually grow up and where it all starts. Because it's not taught in our schools. Most families don't know. They don't even know the questions to ask for their own financial well-being, much less know what to teach their children. And I think that, Jodes, you've been wanting to do some education for a long time, and you were doing it there for a little bit. And I think it is people like you who are just willing to spruik everything that they know.
Yeah.
That are going to at least raise the awareness.
Yeah, well, people don't think it's a pressing thing. They're getting by, and then they're worried about who to trust. So it's hard on the financial education front because there's huge issues around giving advice. You need to be licensed to give advice to people, and even just our conversation today, some could misconstrue it as advice and constituted as that when it's not. And then they don't know where to go or who to trust. I think the idea is that I will not and won't and will never, going forward, affiliate myself with financial institutions because I don't have the control over what I will and won't tell people, and I don't want to flog products. I'd love to see eventually one day, an institution that just gives basic financial planning information without it being affiliated, without there being product flogging, somewhere where people can go and for $100 seminar for 3 hours, they learn about, all these tangible things that they can just go away and apply into their own world, and that makes them better.
Oh, God, bring that
curriculum.
on.
Well, that's what I started, but there's got to be a big call for it, and people get embarrassed about their financial situation. They like to pretend that they've got it all going on. It's very difficult for a lot of people to go, hey, you know what, I put their hand up and say I'm struggling with this, because they don't want their peers, their colleagues or their friends to think that they're not all over it. So that's something that I've already got one program, but rolling out something that people can do comfortably online at night by themselves, or read a bit of information that's not going to cost the earth but will just give them a lot of information. That's definitely something that's in my to-do list for next year, especially around children too, or teenagers.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you should say about this. So when, Howard and I first started looking at, our financial life, once we got out of university, we went to a lot of these places that would be teaching you, but they always had a product to sell. And I've had bank managers who see what you make and try to sell you a product. And that really made me angry. I just said, well, that's it. I'm out of here.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I just, and when he described it to me, I ended up saying to him, you actually don't understand how our finances work. We don't pay the amount of tax you're talking about because we own our business. We don't have a wage, because that's a difference between having a wage and owning a business. You have, tax deductions. Anyway, that's beside the point. So I think what you are coming up with, Jodie, I think would be brilliant, because then you're not pressured into going, well, this is what I want to do. But having said that, people are lazy. People don't want to have to educate themselves. They want you to say, hey, just tell me what to eat, or just tell me where to put my money, or can you help me with my brain, or what physical exercise should I be doing? They don't want to have to think for themselves. But for the people that do want to think for themselves, I just believe that there's a real need for a public education system, not public, private education system that will help people through that. And moving on from finance, I think it's really important, Jodie, and I realise we haven't got a lot of time left, but one of the other things that you are brilliant at is business, and helping people, mentoring people through businesses. And I think that's also important, because most people think that the only people who need coaches are the high-end tennis players and the high-end football players. But people in business also need to be helped and coached and supported. And I know you were telling me about somebody who rang you up and she'd had a little bit of a crisis, and you just to have a cup of coffee with her and calm her down in her business and then move her on to the next step. So if you want to address that in the time we've got left, which isn't long. I just
that's so good. I think business is incredibly isolating. You'll be able to discuss it with your partner if your partner's in the business, but often they're not,
or at home.
Or even at home. I know that feeling, honey. Not to your level, but still. It is, and it's isolating. And, you can Google search, you can try and work out, God, what do I do if this happens? Or, there's a great analogy that footballers and tennis coaches, and when everything's going pear-shaped in your business, just go back to the basics. Just go back to passing the ball. And just keep passing the ball and pass. Don't worry about all the fancy tackling options and all the different manoeuvres and whatever. When the proverbial's hitting the fan, all I want you to do is just stand there and pass the ball, or stand there and hit the ball. And then at some point you'll get back onto it. But people in small business particularly come up against a hurdle or an adversity and drop the ball. And then everything goes pear-shaped. It all becomes too hard. They want to give up. And that's where the coaches, if you're a good coach, you'll recognise that they're struggling. Sometimes people, it depends on, like Kim, you do a lot on human behaviour and personality traits and that sort of thing. Sometimes people struggle to let you know that they're hitting a brick wall. You know, so you need to be, as a coach, appreciative of the fact that they, you know, asking all the open-ended questions to get that information from them to be able to better help them, because they're not apt at being able to explain where they're at themselves. And quite often they don't even know. They know that they're just doing the same thing day in, day out, but they're getting no results.
Well, I think too, the thing that Kaz always talks about, and I think I challenge anyone on any greater thing to push buttons, but when emotions are high, intelligence is low, and there's nothing like money issues to push all buttons and send you into a screaming Banshee Indian who is flapping. So what would be your advice then? What's your top 5 tips around getting financially sound for the good old family at home? Maybe not even necessarily a business person, but around home. What are your 5 tips as far as, or 3 tips, whatever you give us your top?
Yeah. Okay, tops. So the first thing that I would do is just know where you're at today. It's very, very simple. Go and get your latest bank statements from whatever accounts you've got. Take 5 different highlighters. The whole thing's on my website. Just highlight what you're spending, what's the stuff that you can't control, what's the stuff that you can control, and then write it down. So, and people call it a budget. I can't stand budgets myself. You alluded to that as well. But you need to know where it's at. So, for instance, if I go through and I go, okay, well, yellow highlighter is going to highlight all my discretionary spending. So the stuff that I don't really need to spend that I do. So I'm shopping at, you know, far too much at the liquor stores, far too much at Kmart, far too much at Target, you know, the hairdresser and the nails. And if you look and I go, oh, my God, my whole statement is full of yellow highlighter. And I do this with clients. They say, oh, we can't free up cash flow. We're really, really struggling. And then I go through and their whole statement's full of yellow. I'll go, oh, gosh, you've got so much room for improvement. This is awesome. But if everything is fuel, rates, mortgage, school fees, and that's pink, and your whole statements are full of pink, and there's very little yellow, I'll be like, okay, we really are on the bones of our ass here. What else can we be doing? You know, so just know where you're at. Get your superannuation statements together. Understand, add up all your super balances. How much do I have? You know, if you've got 5 supers, roll them into one so that you're consolidating the income power or the earning potential of that money. I love to do an asset and liability indication as well. How much is my house worth? How much are my shares worth? How much have I got in cash? Add it up. How much is my credit card debt? How much is my mortgage? How much is my car loan? Add it up. What's my LVR? And then you can track that over time. So just get a really good snapshot of where you're at. It's terrifying when you start out if you've not done it, but it's so empowering and so incredibly freeing when you're aware of it. That's the first thing. The second thing that I would do is don't beat yourself up. So it's all a headspace thing. Once you're aware of it, just accept the fact that you are where you're at and you're meant to be where you are. And what else can I do differently now? So that's probably my third thing, is all the little improvements that you can make. So can I speak to my banks about, you know, am I on the right mortgage? Can I get an extra 0.5%? Can I speak to the council about paying off my rates monthly or weekly or fortnightly? Can I get a better deal on my mobile phones? There's so many different options in relation to small business. Are there little areas that I can target market without going, I need to spend 10 grand on a marketing campaign? You know, can I go and speak with my P&C group about getting, you know, some press on nutrition or something? You know, there's lots of little things that you can do to help improve your situation overall. The last thing I'd probably suggest is that if things are really, really tough and you're really, really struggling in any area, whether it's small business or your personal environment situation, the government, as much as I struggle with them sometimes, there's lots of opportunities there for you to get extra funding. So if you're really, really struggling, ringing up the Centrelinks of the world and just saying, listen, what am I entitled to? Ringing up small business, finding out what government grants you're entitled to. That's probably the last thing that I'd say, is there's a lot of help if you're prepared to look for it.
That's awesome. Now, can you come to my house and do it for me?
Yes.
I just have to finish with this, though. I do have to say this. you said it before, some people are really wired this way, and some people are wired to spend, some to save, some accrue, and all those sorts of things. I also do think, this is where getting people that are in the knowledge to actually support you to get it right, or to, because it's a lot of energy for those of us that aren't left brain and analyticals and all of that sort of jazz. So you've been a real help for me around that, Jodie, and I'd really like to, can you tell us what your website is and all the details, and maybe if you've got Instagram and Facebook, let us know who you are and where you are.
Yeah. Okay, so it's just Jodie Nolan, JodieNolan.com, and that's my website. But I also share a lot of stuff on Facebook, which is just Jodie Nolan, JodieNolan. That's a public page. So, and then you can comment. The best thing I love is having people interact. So if they have a question, it's not going to cost them anything, they can ask it. And generally I get back to them because that's what I like to do at night when I've got nothing else better to do with a cup of tea, is to get back to questions. An Equus Group is my other website, which is all education-based. That's EQUIS, Equus Group. And Equus because I love horses, so I figured I had to look at my business name for the rest of my life. I may as well have one I love. So that's equusgroup.com.au. And on there is a whole heap of tools that you can download. Free tools. There's a budget planner. There's that thing I was talking about the assets and liabilities. That's on there as well, that you can just download for free. Tons of information on small business, tons of information on personal finances and super and things like that. And most of that is free on that website as well, plus educational sessions and that sort of thing. So
that's so awesome.
Well, this has been a really amazing podcast, and I'm pretty sure that everybody who's listened to it would feel exactly the same way. I think what you've done today, Jodie, is you've brought incredible awareness to a subject that most people would prefer to sweep underneath the carpet and hope that it goes away nicely. But I think that...
Yep.
But thank you so much for sharing so openly and honestly, and just like giving everything that you've got to our listeners. I'm pretty sure everybody's going to be over the moon and trying to track you down after today's podcast. So thank you, my love. This has been amazing.
That's fabulous. Thanks, girls. Thank you. It's been an honor. I appreciate it.
And also, too, for those of you who don't know yet or haven't booked yourselves in, the Wellness Summit in Melbourne is coming up. And it is on, I'm just going to get the exact...
This weekend.
This weekend. Mm-hmm. So it's Saturday and Sunday, and our beautiful Jodes is going to be coming down, and she's going to be hanging out with us. So if you want to meet her, make sure that you come down and introduce yourself to her and tell her that you've heard her on the podcast. She'll be beside herself excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure that you go to the Wellness Summit. If you haven't already secured your tickets, go to thewellnesssummit.com. You can also post your comments about today's show on allthews.facebook.com/up for a chat, or you can go to thewellnesscouch.com and /up for a chat and post your comments there. And you can also get access to the Wellness Summit from the Wellness Couch website, which you may be used to by now, which is allthews.thewellnesscouch.com. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in to today's show. It's been an absolute treat to share one of our most favourite human beings with you. We can't wait to share more with you on the next podcast. So join us here next week and become part of the ripple effect that's changing the world. We're going to see you on the ride. Bye for now, everybody.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.